Everybody, I'm Anthony Moore, pastor of Carolina Church.
And I am Lady Cynthia Moore. We're so elated that you found us. We're so happy, glad to see you here today.
Listen, there's something special that God wants to do today just for you. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to get connected. I want you to lock in, and let's go all in together on today.
Yes, so on your mark, set,
let's roll.
Welcome into the warm embrace of Carolina Church. I'm your digital pastor, Sherman Nelson, and I'm here to ensure that you feel 100% connected throughout our service. Now, we have a dynamic digital worship team, and they're standing by, ready to welcome you to the party. Whether you're sitting in the pew, in the sanctuary, logged in from your cell phone, about to hop on an airplane, or whether you're watching online, live or on demand, we welcome you to get comfortable and make yourself at home here.
Don't be a ghost and go silent. Let us hear your heart. Come on, tell us how we can pray for you today by dropping us a prayer request in the chat room or via email anytime today, this week, this month, or this year to prayer@carolinachurch.org. We're already praying with you.
At any given moment, you might be ready to take that next step and go all in. If you like to grow in relationship, serving in our community, grow in discipleship, join the membership, or simply stay connected further, just drop us a line in the chat, or you can visit us at carolinachurch.org/connect. We're here to walk this thing out with you.
You'll see we're a true family here. Connecting is easy, so don't be shy. In our community, you can give at any time via text, using our official Carolina Church app, online or by mail. Join us in cheerfully giving today and anytime.
And above all, don't forget to tap, share, or text a friend right now and tell the world to join you right here at Carolina.
We've been waiting right here just for you. Now let's get the party started and go all in together.
Hi, we are
a community of believers
who are making disciples,
maturing believers,
And mastering our lives
To live to the fullest potential in Christ.
Wow, that's who we are.
We're ready to go all in
5,
4,
3, 2, 1. Let's worship.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday in the Word. I am grateful to have you as a part of this audience. My name is Anthony Moore. I serve as the senior pastor here at Carolina Church. I'm going to ask if you would, let's go ahead and jump right into our study for this particular week. I am specifically dealing with resetting our lives, and the title of this series, Reset Your Life. And this happens to be part 8 of the series, and certainly you can catch up with all of the other lessons that have been given by simply going to our website and getting that information. On today, I want to continue our study dealing with resetting our lives in the area of relationships, in all of our relationships with each other, we're called to love and to serve and to give, to bless, and to help. That's our responsibility. It's a general principle for every relationship. Each of us are called to love. We're called to serve. We're called to give. We're called to bless. And we're called to help, which is the general principle for every relationship. On last week, we started diving deeper into specific relationships that we have in life in order to discover what God's requirements and instructions are, so that we can reset those relationships when the alignment is off, getting it back to its original intended purpose. Now, we began with this one main principle on last week, and that main principle was know God's requirements for relationship. That was our main point that we sought to hammer. It's really the main point that's driving this lesson. Know God's requirements for the relationships. We cannot properly reset in our relationships without knowing God's requirements and instructions for the relationship. The first relationship we started to tackle was the relationship of the family. That's the one that we started to tackle with on last week. It was the relationship of the family. Families are the basic building blocks of society. Families are the basic building block of community. Family is the basic building block of the church. God cares about family. And so all throughout the Bible, you'll see God emphasize family. And here's why. Because family is the basic building block of society, the community, and the church. So the question that we raise is this: how do we get family? I mean, if it's the building block of society, the building block of community, the building block of the church, then how do we get family? Well, marriage is the basic building block of the family. Family gives us society. It gives us community. It gives us the church. But family starts with marriage. God has given unto us specific instructions for the family relationship. Whenever God begins to talk about family, he goes to marriage first. And here's why. Because God knows that if you have a strong marriage, you'll have a strong family. The stronger the marriage, the stronger the family. And God has specific instructions for the family. Now listen, let me ask you, could it be that the enormity of what we are currently facing in our society stems from the fact that we have disconnected, discounted, and disregarded God's instructions for the family? I mean, y'all, could it be that the reason why we are experiencing what we are experiencing in our world is because we have disconnected, discounted, and disregarded God's instructions for the family? I mean, the drug and alcohol use, the violence, the shootings, the suicides, the mental and health challenges, the crime, the disrespect. I mean, y'all, could it be that somewhere along the way of creating family, we abandoned the instructions, the directions that God gave us for developing family? Family creates society, family makes communities, and our churches are comprised of families. Now, I need you all to know this. Satan is always telling us lies. Always. He's always telling us lies. He's always trying to deceive us and make us believe that we don't need God, nor do we need God's instructions. So here's how it plays out. Let me walk through this. I want you to see how it plays out. God gives us directions for this life and the family. Satan's weapon has always been deception. So what Satan does is that Satan comes along and he sows deception in our minds. He wants us to believe the lies that he tells. Now remember, you all, he is the father of lies. Deception then becomes the root of all of our warfare. The purpose of deception is to get you and I to doubt God. Doubt that God has our best interests at heart, which will lead us into disobedience. Yeah. Doubt leads us into disobedience. Now, in order for us to disobey God, we have to disbelieve that what God said is true. And disobedience will then ultimately lead us to death. Now, we do know this, you all, based upon the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 10. We know this. We know that Satan's modus operandi is to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what John chapter 10, verse 10 tells us. But I want you to note, and please bear this in mind, it starts with direction from God. It then moves to deception by Satan, causing you and I to doubt what God said, giving you and I ammunition to disobey God, which ultimately is going to lead us to death. Now, you all, I want you to please get this. I want you to get this, because this that I've just given to you is the template that Satan uses for everything that he does in our lives. He's going to try to get us to disregard, to disconnect, to discount the directions that God's giving unto us. And he does that simply by getting you and I to come along and not only doubt and disbelieve, but he does that with the whole idea of getting us to know that his main weapon that he utilizes is deception. So we get the direction, we get deception, we then have doubt. Doubt leads us to disobedience, and then disobedience will lead us to death. Now, as we try to trace where we've gone wrong, could it be that we have ignored the instructions God has given to us for family? I want you to see what Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. Because there, Paul, when you look at Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, Paul's describing for us our relationship rules as husbands. He says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The phrase their love, your wives, is important. That word love is the word agape, A-G-A-P-E. Agape is the most divine dimension of love. It's not a love based upon feelings or emotions, but it's a love that's based upon action. So Paul tells us that when he describes love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, he says love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy or boast. Right there, y'all, Paul helps us to see that love is really about an action. The most significant need that a wife has in a marriage relationship is to know that she is secured by the love of her husband. Whenever we as husbands begin to drift anywhere in the marriage, may I suggest to you that we may want to consider resetting with our love for our wives. This is what it says. Husbands have to love their wives as they love themselves, and as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for the church. Do me a favor. In that same chapter, chapter 5, drop down to verse 33 of chapter 5. Same chapter. Drop down to verse 33. Here in verse 33, Paul tells us, however, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Now, right here, Paul writes, respect your husband. Now, I had to ask, why did Paul say one thing for the husbands and something else for the wives? Is it that men don't need to be loved? Is it that women don't need to be respected? Let me help you all. No, neither is the case. Men do need to be loved and women do need to be respected. It's important for them to both be interconnected. However, the primary need of a wife is love. I want y'all to help me. Come on, get this. The primary need of a wife is love, and the primary need of a man is respect. For the brother, for the man to feel respected is a sense of being honored and valued for who he is and for what he does. And it gives a sense of appreciation and recognition for his contribution. So the Bible says that a wife must respect her husband. I'm giving you all rules and instructions that God gives unto us, directions that he gives unto us for relationships. And specifically, I'm dealing with the husband and the wife. Husband, love your wife. Wife, respect your husband. Now, if you are drifting in marriage, this is how you reset within the marriage. This is how we get back to knowing God's requirements for the marriage relationship. Now, I want to take a look at the rules for relationship with the children. I'm dissecting this family piece. So Paul continues to give us rules. He gives us rules for relationship within the family. I want you to go over one book, Ephesians chapter 6. I want you to focus in on with me verses 1 through 4 of Ephesians chapter 6. Here's what it says. Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord. For this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you and you will have a long life on the earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Now, I want you all to please take note of this. We've gotten instructions for the husbands. We've gotten instructions for the wife. Now there are instructions for the children. Later, we're going to see instructions for the parent or the parents. He addressed the whole family. So Paul, being inspired by the Spirit of God, he gives to the children the rules, the relationship rules that they are to adhere to. He says, children, obey and honor your parents, and you will be given a promise. Things will go well for you. Now listen, you all, I want you all to get this. The children's job, while under the care of their parents, is to respond to them appropriately. I'll say it again. I want you all to please hear me. The children's job under the care of their parents is to respond to their parents appropriately. Their role is to honor their parents their entire life. Paul then says to the parents, he says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. He tells us to be mindful of how we approach our children. He says, don't provoke them. Don't stir up. Treat them with love. He goes on to say we ought to bring them up with the discipline and instructions that comes from the Lord. So parents, listen to me. Our primary job as parents is to provide our children with discipline and instructions. Wow. Discipline and instructions based upon what the Lord has said. Now, I got to park here for a moment because I need you all to hear me today on this as we're trying to figure out where did we go wrong when we're looking at how our children and how this younger generation is turning out. You got to ask yourself, where did we go wrong? You remember back in the day when my mom was raising me and my siblings, we didn't have a choice on the matter of whether or not we were going to go to church or whether we were going to receive the instructions from the Sunday school teacher or whether we were going to have vacation Bible school poured into us. We didn't have an option. Mom made sure that we, in fact, got to church. We didn't have a choice of whether or not we were going to get up. We determined, some of us, well, not me, we determined, some of us have determined that, that when we got grown, we were not going to make our children turn out or go to church, go to Sunday school, be in church, hear the instructions of the Lord. Now, if you are not teaching them the instructions of the Lord, then how are our children going to grow up and become mindful and respectful of what God has given unto us as the rules and regulations and restrictions for how he wants us to govern ourselves? I'm sorry, y'all. We've got to understand that we may have gone wrong with not making sure our children are receiving the instructions of the Lord. He says you ought to discipline and instruct them. Now, discipline is the capacity to help children develop their habits that they need in their lives. It's going to benefit them for the rest of their lives. Discipline is not only consequences when things are wrong. And you're talking to someone or listening to somebody right now who, in fact, I'm old school. So, I believe in making sure that we discipline children. But I also understand that discipline is not just punishing them or giving unto them consequences when things are wrong. Discipline is far more than that. But discipline is also, it's helping them to create habits that will create character. Discipline is what creates character. Good habits make good character. Yeah, we ought to also be after knowing that establishing good habit patterns, those good habit patterns that are being done and taught to our children will help them to grow in a way that's pleasing to God. So then listen, you all, instruction is related to wisdom. Discipline brings character and instructions bring wisdom. Our primary job as parents is not to be their friend. Oh, God. I want you all to hear me, you all. We have gone wrong from the instructions, from the directions that God's given unto us. Our primary job as parents is not to be their friend. That's not our job. Our primary job is imparting character and wisdom to the next generation. When the family gets off track, reset is necessary. And we have to go back to what God said in the instructions He's given unto us. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. Children, obey your parents. Honor them. Parents, don't provoke your children. Raise your children in discipline and instructions that comes from the Lord. Oh, my Lord, I want you all to hear me. I want you all to get this. And y'all, unfortunately, the devil has utilized his old ways to get us to go away from the instructions and the directions that God's given unto us. Here it is again. God gives us direction. Satan comes along and he seeks to deceive us with deception. He deceives us with lies. We then start doubting the direction that the Lord has given unto us. And the moment we start doubting, it gives us room to then disobey. Because now we can justify why we do what we do. And when we do that, the end result is death. All right. I'm gonna come. Let me give you all the second part of family. I want to try to get through this today. The second part of family that I want to deal with is how to handle conflict within the relationships. I want to deal with how to handle conflict within the relationships. How do we reset when we find ourselves in the midst of conflict among family or any kind of relationship for that matter? In every relationship, God gives us instructions on how we can reset. Now, I think y'all would agree with me that the family conflict is something that all of us have experienced or experiencing currently. There's not one family that's listening to me right now that at not one point or another had to navigate through conflict. All of us have had to do this at some point or another. And even in the Bible, we see conflict among family. I want us to take a look at Genesis chapter 13. It's kind of lengthy. I'm going to read all the way through verses 1 through 13, but I want you to see this conflict. I want you to see it. I want to examine the family of Abram and Lot. Now, here's what the text says. So Abram left Egypt, traveled north to the Negev, along with his wife and Lot and all that they owned. Abram was very rich in livestock, silver and gold. From the Negev, they continued traveling by stages towards Bethel. And they pitched their tents between Bethel and Ai, where they had camped before. This was the same place where Abram had built the altar, and there he worshiped the Lord again. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, had also become very wealthy with flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and many tents. But the land could not support both Abram and Lot with all of their flocks and herds living so close together. So dispute broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land. Finally, Abram said to Lot, "Let's not allow this conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. After all, we are close relatives. The whole countryside is open to you. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want the land to the left, then I'll take the land on the right. If you prefer the land on the right, then I'll go to the left." Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley in the direction of Zorah. The whole area was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord or the beautiful land of Egypt. This was before, by the way, the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot chose for himself the whole Jordan Valley to the east of them. He went there with his flocks and servants and parted company with his uncle Abram. So Abram settled in the land of Canaan. Lot moved his tent to a place near Sodom and settled among the cities of the plain. But the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sinned against the Lord. Now, let me get you to see this. Abram and Lot were relatives living together in the same section of town, and both were wealthy. Their wealth was so much that the land where they were could not handle the demand that their flocks and herds were requiring. There were too many animals for the available pasture. So fights broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and those of Lot. The herdsmen argued and got on each other's nerves. Conflict ensued among the family. Now, what I think is most helpful for us in bringing about resolution in the midst of conflict, helping us to reset, are the principles that we're going to see outlined here in this text. Before we look at the principles, I think we ought to, at least do some primary things. Let's define conflict, and then let's define resolution. What is conflict? What is resolution? It's important to note, y'all, that whether in the general secular sense or from a biblical sense, conflict is still conflict. The only difference between the two perspectives, whether it's the religious or whether it's the secular, whether it's the godly or the ungodly, the difference between the two perspectives is how they are resolved. But the truth of the matter is, whether it's secular or whether it's godly, conflict is still conflict. The Bible gives us a different way to resolve conflict than the secular way does. So here it is. Conflict is to be contradictory, at variance, or in opposition, to clash, to disagree, to fight or contend, to do battle. That's conflict. Allow me to show you what resolution is. Resolution is defined as the act or process of resolving. It's the final resolving of it. Now, when you look at what I just given you in terms of definition for conflict resolution, when you put those two words together, this is what we're going to have. We're going to have conflict resolution is a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement or contention, antagonism, discord, struggle, strife, or quarrel among them. So, the first thing I need you to see that this story teaches us is how to handle confusion. That's the first thing I want you to see. I want you to see confusion. It's right there in this text. Confusion is in this text, and it's teaching us how to handle confusion within the family. I want you all to hear me on this. Resolution is needed when confusion becomes the basis for an existing relationship. Confusion, when it becomes the basis for an existing relationship, resolution is needed. It's needed. Watch verses 6 through 7. It tells us that the land could not support both Abram and Lot with all of their flocks and herds. And as a result, verse 7 tells us, so dispute broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. The first thing that we see is the principle of confusion that led to conflict between Abram and Lot herdsmen. Whenever there is confusion, you can rest assured that conflict is bound to surface. And what we know, according to scripture, is this, you all. We know God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. Resolution is needed because confusion has surfaced. Now, let me help you all with something. If confusion is a part of your household or part of your family relationships or any relationship, I need you to know God is not there, because he's not a part. God cannot be a part of confusion. He's not the author of confusion. Let me give you the second principle that you'll see interwoven within this story, and that is the principle of care. C-A-R-E, the principle of care. So we saw the principle of confusion, it's there, but now we see the principle of care. See, Abram could have sided with his men against Lot, or he could have told Lot to stay in his place. But instead, he cared enough. He valued their relationship over the petty details of disagreements. Come on, you all. He cared more about the relationship than about the material things that they had acquired or that which was dividing them. Abram cared enough to lovingly address the matter. So the aim for Abram was restoring and or achieving harmony. Watch what verse 8 says. Verse 8 says this, you all. Verse 8 says, finally Abram said to Lot, let's not allow this conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. He cared enough about their relationship versus the thing that was dividing them. I gotta hurry. Let me give you all this third principle. The third principle you see in this story is the principle of concession. The principle of concession. Let me show you what verse 9 says. Let me cut across the field. Verse 9 says this, you all. The whole countryside is open to you. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want the land to the left, then I'll take the land on the right. If you prefer the land on the right, then I'll go to the left. Now, I want y'all to note this, please. I think this is very important for us to get this. I think it's important to note that there are instances where separation is necessary. You're not listening to me. I'm going to say it again. I said there are instances where separation is necessary. This story is showing us and teaching us. As a matter of fact, we see it there in verse number 9. And if you drop down to verse 11 on your own time, look at verse 11, and I promise you, you're going to see it there too. The problem is not separating. It's the manner in which you separate. It's how you separate. So Abram looked for an expedient and mutually acceptable solution, which partially satisfies both parties. Now, this, by the way, speaks volumes about Abram because he was the oldest. He was the uncle. Lot was the nephew. He was the youngin. Lot was the nephew, but Abram's attitude was right. Abram understood that love does not demand its own way or insist on its rights. Simply put, you all, love compromises Abram. Love compromises Abram. Compromises his rights of choice as the superior to winning a long-lasting relationship. Abram sought to accommodate the concerns of Lot rather than seeking to accommodate himself. All right. Now, in addition to us seeing the principle of confusion, we saw the principle of care, the principle of concession. The fourth thing we see is communication, and I'll hang my hat here. I do apologize for going over, but let me just give you this last C under this principles for how to handle conflict within the family. The fourth thing we see is communications. Abram demonstrated the importance of making an adjustment within his attitude, which is why we see Abram caring enough to be willing to even offer a concession. And now that the attitude is right, we then have the principle of communication. I want you to see what it says in verse 8. I just want to use that first line in verse 8. It says, finally, Abram said to Lot. Finally, Abram said to Lot. He started communicating with Lot. See, I believe that in conflict resolution, the step that should be given much consideration is communication. Abram talked it over with Lot. He was willing to discuss it with Lot, even though he was older and was Lot's uncle. He was willing to discuss it with Lot. It's here that we see Abram exhibiting great humility that all of us should emulate. If the other party is not willing to come to the table and talk, and if they're supposed to be our subordinate, we should take the initiative and exhibit godly understanding by calling for a talk. Often, you all, conflict arises or lingers because of lack of communication. Abram sought to make Lot a partner rather than an opponent. Abram worked with Lot to find a win-win solution to the problem at hand, that which most satisfies the concerns of both parties. The win-win approach sees conflict as an opportunity to come to a mutually beneficial result. It includes identifying the underlying concerns of the other party and finding an alternative which meets each party's concerns. You win, they win. And that was exactly what Abram did when he communicated with Lot. Abram talked it over with Lot. How can we solve this as partners rather than as opponents? Abram said to Lot, take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. Lot chose what he wanted. Abram took what Lot didn't want. And here's why and the reason why Abram could do that was because he trusted God to take care of him and provide for his needs. And God did. In verse 14 through 17, after Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, look as far as you can see. Now Lot's gone. He done took his part. But because Abram did the right thing, look at how God rewards him. The Lord said to Abram, look as far as you can see in every direction, north, south, east, and west. I'm giving all this land as far as you can see to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that, like the dust of the earth, they cannot be counted. Go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you. My brothers and sisters, that's what God does when we go and do it the way that God says it ought to be done. He rewards us. Our egos are bruised, but God gets glory from our actions. Hey, listen, I gotta go. I do apologize. I'm over time. Thank you for your time. Hey, stay tuned to next week because I got more to give you. I got more to give you. I'm going to walk through this whole idea about relationships, and I want to show you some additional relationships that we are going to have to work through and reset ourselves in so that we can get back to the original design that God had in mind, and we can receive the unlimited possibilities that the Lord has. Now listen, you all, 2 things I need you to do before I go. 1, if you need a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, or you're looking for a church, I want you to text 94000. Put in the chat line, connect CMBC, and we're going to respond immediately. The second thing I need you to do before you sign off is to give unto the Lord an offering. We bring unto God an offering. On the screen are multiple ways in which you can give. Let me thank you for your time. I appreciate you so very much. Know this. Here are the principles. On your mark, get set. Let's grow. Love you much. God bless you.